Today we're going to be going through getting photos from your camera into Lightroom, do some basic processing on your photos, and then we'll export them out to JPEG. So the first thing you need to do is plug your camera in. So you'll need to find your USB cable and plug it into the side of your camera. So you can see I've got my camera here, and the first thing to notice is that under this flap on the side of the camera is a port. That's where you plug in a USB cable, and then the other end of this cable goes into my computer. And of course the only other thing I have to do is turn on the camera. There, you can see the screen's come on, so it's ready to go now. Okay, so now that you've got it plugged in, now Lightroom may have automatically gone into import mode. If it hasn't, you can just click the import button here, and remember that you need to be in library mode to be able to get to the import function. So there it is. I'm going to click that button, and up comes some photographs. Now, see the grey ones up the top here? The reason they've been greyed out is because they're actually already loaded onto this computer. These were some photos that Jackie took at CWF, and they've been loaded onto this computer. But these ones down the bottom, they're not greyed out. They haven't been loaded onto Lightroom. You can see that it's automatically identified that these ones are new, and it's ticked the box. Now, you may not want to grab them all, so maybe you just want to grab the first 4 or something like that. So click on the first one, hold down Shift, click on the 4th one, and then I can check and uncheck those ones. I can also do things like uncheck all and check all, things like that. Click on nothing to unselect the photos. So maybe if I uncheck all, select the first, Shift select that one, and then I can click on that, and that will just get those first 6 photos. So that's how you can just grab the ones that you're after. In this case, I'm going to grab all of them, so I'm going to click the check all button. Now over on the side here is where I tell it to put the files, the photos, and in my case I need to tell it to go to my image work folder in Lightroom, and then I go down to, I've got a folder in here for Phototeam, and I'm going to just click that. And what I'm going to do is go up into subfolder. If I check that button, and then I'm going to say, I'm just going to put training video, and you can see down the bottom it's created this training video folder automatically for me. I find that a useful way of using it. I could have just gone and created the folder manually, but in this case it just does it automatically on the way past, so it's quite a convenient feature. So I've selected my photos, and I've told it to go into a subfolder of Phototeam called _training video. I just put the underscore in there so it lists at the top. I'm going to hit import down the bottom right here. Okay, so what happens now is you can see the progress bar on the top left, it's going along, and what Lightroom's doing is it's looking at what's called the current import. In this case now it's called the previous import folder. Now that's not actually the folder that we created, and in fact what I'll do is I'm going to just scroll down. There we go, there's my Phototeam folder, and then click on here, click on training video, and you can see that nothing's changed over here because the training video folder was the last thing imported, so they look the same. Same photos, it's not a copy of the photos or anything like that. These are the real ones. So the first thing I'm going to do now is I can just double click, and now I can see this photo full screen, or larger anyway. And then I can just use my left and right button on my keyboard like that. You can see it gives you a quick preview, and then it says loading, and then you'll notice it gets a bit clearer after the loading's finished. So that's the photos. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to do my basic processing. So if I click to the develop mode, and you can see once I do that, these panels on the left and the right, they change. Now over on the right hand panel, there's a few things I want to do. First thing is I'm going to go to the noise reduction panel, and I normally put about 20% noise reduction on most things. If it's, let's say it's a really low light situation, very high ISO, I might actually play with it just to see what's better. In most cases, I just find about 20% on pretty much anything does a really nice job. And then a little bit further down in lens corrections, notice there's these basic, profile, color and manual. You're in profile mode. So just click profile and then enable profile corrections. Notice that the photo changes slightly when I check and uncheck that box. What it's doing is that Lightroom knows the camera, the lens, and it has a profile that relates to that lens. And what it knows that this particular lens has a certain amount of chromatic aberration, certain amount of distortion and things like that. And just by clicking that button, it compensates for that and fixes it up a little bit. So I always do both that and a bit of noise reduction as a matter of course before I do any other processing. So I've just done those two things, noise reduction and profile corrections, just to the one photo that's selected down here. But what if I wanted to now apply that to all of them? Well, that's simple. I hold my shift key down and click on the last one. Don't click on this dot here. That's another function. Just click anywhere but the dot and you can see that it's now selected them all. Now if I just click over here on sync, I want to sync, let me just bring that onto the screen. I want to sync the noise reduction and the lens corrections. And it always complains if I don't have process version turned on, so I'll just turn that one on as well. Don't click check all, check none. These are the only ones you want to actually synchronize. Now what that does is it copies those two things I just did, which was about 20% of noise reduction and profile corrections across the photos that I've selected down here. So you notice that this little icon down here, that just tells me that this photo has had some processing done on it, whereas these haven't. But as soon as I hit synchronize, watch them. Okay, so now you can see that all of these photos have had that basic noise reduction applied and lens corrections applied. And now I can scroll through my photos, and there they all are, etc., etc. So let's say I'm happy with all of these. I'm kind of not, but for today's exercise, I'm happy with them all. What I want to do is now export them out to JPEG. Remember, these are in RAW, and any changes that I make to them in Lightroom doesn't actually write or save to the RAW, it saves to the Lightroom database. But how do I get those corrected photos all out into a form that can be used by the church office, which is JPEG? What I do is I go back into library mode. So rather than develop, now I'm back in library, which is really, library's all about file processing. And when I'm in library mode, I can just click this button here and that just goes back into grid mode. And I'm going to select them all. Now I can do a shift. So click on the first one, shift click on the last one, or I can hold down Control on a PC or Command on a Mac and hit A for all, and that selects all. And that's another quick way of doing it. I've selected them. Now I'm going to do an export. So I click the export button. Now I've got some presets already set up, but how about we just go through it just so that you know, and you can set your own preset up. In fact, what I'll do is I'll remove my preset, which is JPEG full size. I'm just going to remove that. Now I'm going to go through and I'm just going to look at some of these settings. Now you should go through this if you haven't done it before, because the defaults are probably not what you want. The defaults aren't as high quality as they could be and things like that. Export to a specific folder, choose it later, same folder as original photo. In this case, you want to just choose the folder later, and typically you would just maybe choose a folder on your desktop or something like that. But you would do that at the time of export. You wouldn't pre-bake that into this preset. Do you want to add them to the catalog? No, you don't. They're just like a byproduct of the raw photos. It's the raw photos that you want in the Lightroom catalog. which is the Lightroom database. But you typically you wouldn't want to keep the JPEGs in there as well. Existing files. So if it finds files of the same name in the same location, ask what to do. And it'll say, oh, that file's exist, you want to overwrite, things like that. File renaming, you don't want to rename. You want to leave them using the original file name that the camera created. So make sure that this is unchecked. Don't have to worry about video. Make sure that quality is set to 100. I've noticed that Lightroom defaults to 80. Make it 100. Image format is JPEG, and I think, yep, sRGB is fine. You don't want to resize it. You don't want to do any sharpening. You should include the metadata. That's things like information about what lens was used, what settings was used. That can be useful when we're doing training books and things like that. You don't need a watermark, and after doing the work, would you like it to do something? So maybe what we'll do is we'll get it to show in Finder. On Windows, it'll say show in Explorer. It's just the file manager program. And what I'm going to do now is, now that I'm happy with all these settings, I don't want to have to go through this all the time. So I come over here and hit add, and I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to call it JPEG full size, and hit create. And there it is. And now, so I click on that, and I can hit export. And remember, it's applying it to all these photos that I have selected. Hit export. And boom, it's opened up Explorer. Oh, and now it's going to say, where do you want to save them? So I'm going to just go to my desktop, create a new folder, and call it training video. Create. There it is, and hit open. So now it's up here. You can see that it's now doing the work. Now it's creating JPEG files out of these CR2 files. Depending on how many you've got to go and how fast your computer is, it's time to go and get a coffee or not. Here we go. So it's exported them, it's opened up Finder and gone into that folder. And in fact, if I just click on this button, say here, here's all the JPEGs, there they are, and I can just go through them one by one. There they are, all ready to go. And that's how you can get photos into and back out of Lightroom.